All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of MBA Success. After a little bit of a hiatus, we have our next guest, and I'm very excited to have a chat today with Kavita Herbert, the CEO and founder of Backbone, who did her MBA a while ago back at the University of Technology of Sydney. So, welcome, Kavita, and looking forward to having a chat with you today.
Thank you, Ross. Thanks for having me on your show. And gosh, yes, it feels like I did my MBA a lifetime ago.
I can imagine. Even mine's only 5 years ago, and it feels like a lifetime ago. So, no, look, I'm excited. I'm just going to jump straight in, and we're going to talk about Backbone because you founded this business, as CEO. How long have you been running it for? And just sort of give us that sort of high level what you do and or what the business does.
Yeah, so look, founded the business just over 2 years ago. And it's really interesting how life brings you to a point and gets you to do something completely different. So I spent majority of my career in the corporate sector. So I worked for a lot of founding teams in tech. So I was in the founding team of LinkedIn, Dropbox, Uber, and so I rode the whole tech disruptor wave a few times, loved it. And then in 2021, I decided to set up my own consulting business, as you do.
Yeah.
And I set it up, and the idea was to work with a lot of tech founders and really help them with their go to market strategy and a range of different revenue needs. And so I set that up with great gusto in June 2021. A week later, the second lockdown hit.
Okay.
Um, and it was challenging, right? But I pivoted, moved to more online strategy, got my first customers. But then I realized as the business started running a bit more smoothly, I realized that all my customers were coming from my network, right?
Mhm.
And then I started speaking with other business owners out there, and I realized small businesses and who are the lifeblood of the Aussie economy,
Mm.
majority of us work purely on word of mouth and really rely on our own networks. And I thought there's a gap and a bit of a flaw in the market,
Mm.
because you may have the world's best service or the best product, but if nobody knows about it, you're doing your own business a disservice. But small businesses don't have the resources or time
Yeah.
or money, and so that was the genesis of the idea. And so we built Backbone as a platform purely for businesses, to help with that increased visibility, reach, opportunity. And we did that by just creating this ecosystem and bringing a whole bunch of small businesses across a variety of industries in close proximity. And that itself creates opportunity amongst them. So everyone comes together, and we've gamified the way businesses can connect, learn, promote
Mhm.
for mutual benefit. So that's how Backbone came about.
Yeah, I love it. And my wife's a small business owner, and obviously the circles that she sort of spends time and networking with that are completely unrelated to her continue to provide heaps of value. So when like I see her journey in doing that and like, oh, I met up with this person who does this and they gave me this idea that I could potentially bring into my business. And I thought that sounds kind of like the exact kind of thing that you're trying to do, right? Is you got different businesses, they've got completely unique, types of like, things that they need to do to create value, but the cross pollination of them is just magic.
Absolutely. I'm a huge believer of outsource to the experts. You know, you're probably an expert in a different skill to what I am, and then as is the next business out there. But if we combine our skills, our resources, I genuinely believe the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm.
And that's kind of the what underlies the values of Backbone. So we tell all our members, pay it forward. Treat others the way you'd like to be treated. And
Yeah.
honestly, when we work as allies versus competitors, because as they say, the rising tide, it raises all
Yeah.
ships.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in the early days of founding this, and I guess first of all, is this the first business you founded from scratch? Is this your sort of first time doing that journey?
Well, second one, because I,
Okay.
I founded the consulting business, which I still
Okay.
have, the K
Yep.
Factor. I still work with a lot of tech founders. So I still have that consulting business running in the background.
Yep.
Backbone's my, latest and my biggest baby, so to
Yeah.
speak. So really putting a lot of I'm very passionate about the business, very passionate about this space. It took a while to build a platform. It took nearly a year to get it to a place where we were happy. And then there's constant iteration. So even now we're looking at integrating AI and making it even more intuitive and even more useful to small businesses. But then since we've launched, it's been about 15 months since we officially brought it out to market. We've got about 500 businesses
Oh, wow.
that have signed up. Majority across Australia, but we're starting to organically attract a handful from overseas as well. So yeah, it's just making the whole world, the business world, smaller, right? Because
Yeah,
we're doing business now with each other across geographies.
and when you say platform, this is a web-based platform that sort of you become a member and then you can sign in, and what you've created is that sort of built like all the functions and features that somebody might need to go and find people. And you mentioned the gamification element. Like, are they getting points? Do they get rewarded for like, getting points? I'm really curious in that side of things as
All
well.
of that and about and more. So yeah, so it's a closed vetted platform,
Yeah.
right? There are only businesses on there. It's been described by people as LinkedIn for business. Someone called it Tinder for business the other day, just because it's so easy to scroll through businesses and one click of a button and you can make contact business owner to business owner.
Yep.
Very high professional services demographic on the platform, and by virtue of size, because it's all 200 employees and less. The
Yeah.
kind of people who are actually running the accounts are all CEOs, directors, founders, or very senior business leaders, right? And so you've got a very affluent but a very intelligent cohort running it. The app is web-based, as you correctly picked up on, so no download needed. Easy to just access on both your phone and a laptop. Um, we've got a marketplace component. There's in-app advertising. We've gamified the way businesses can vouch for each other. Yes, you earn credits, and the credits help you do additional things on the platform. So whether that's promoting your business or searchability. So one of the big flaws I felt when I started my first consulting businesses was, how do I get SEO right? And I don't
Mm.
think anyone's really solved the big mystery of SEO.
Yeah.
But the ones who actually end up on the first page have told me that it costs them, in excess of six figures.
Yeah.
Now, most small businesses don't spend more than $5,000 a year, let alone six figures, right, on
Yeah.
marketing. And so, again, the points you get can also help you with the searchability. So, the more businesses that vouch for you, it puts you up on the search.
Yep.
So, there's a whole range of things that you can do.
Yeah. So,
Plus, we do online events and we do business speed dating
yeah.
and business spotlights, just more forums for business owners and business leaders to meet in a time efficient manner
Mhm.
and just get more opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, creating that value in that way. That's awesome. And so, I guess thinking about your journey, like what are some of the standout challenges that you had to overcome, or and like what did you learn from starting the consulting side that you took in and went, I'm so glad I've gone through this experience and know kind of some of the solution to begin with. Yeah, what were some of the hardest parts?
That's a really good question. So, if I think back to when I set up my consulting business, I remember my first couple of weeks, I was just drowning in admin
Mm.
and paperwork. And, I was getting my business set up and there was the legal paperwork and the account. And that's when I realized that it is not the best use of my time to be doing all of this other stuff, even the marketing and the social media. And I wanted to spend time in front of my customers because I felt that's where I could add most value.
Mhm.
That's what would give value to my business. And so that's where I really started developing this whole concept of outsource to the experts, right?
Mhm.
And so that was one learning that I took to Backbone. And even today, I highly encourage business owners and leaders to, outsource to the specialists. If there's someone that can do a, non core business function better than you, outsource it. It'll be worth its weight in gold for the
And
time you get back that you can
uh,
spend with your customers.
absolutely, yeah. You got to know where your time is best spent. In terms of doing that delegation, are you a very rigid person and stringent in terms of I've created a a policy and a process and I'm kind of handing that off? Or are you a bit more like, here, you know what the job to be done is, you're the expert, like you go and do that?
I'm very outcome driven.
Yep.
So even when I have led teams in the past, anyone who's been in my team would tell you that the outcome is more important than the process.
Mm-hmm.
Because I recognize, none of us are robots. We're all individuals. We all have our own personal style, our own way of getting the job done. And I respect that. So I'm a big believer of, hey, this is the North Star. This is where we're all getting to. I am happy with you following your own process. If you need to collaborate, if you need to brainstorm ideas, if you need help, happy to jump in and provide that structure where needed. But really, the idea is, you do you. And that's where, we all succeed together.
Yeah. And we did just, you cut out there for a bit, but I feel like I picked up enough of that to keep it going. For you, and being the business owner, to your point of
Yeah.
the North Star, and obviously you can have the big goal on the hill and say, we're all going to climb this hill and we're going to go here, but naturally there's milestones along the way. One of the most challenging parts can always be how to articulate that goal so that what's in your head is the same as what's in another person's head, because that's clearly going to be one of the biggest challenges, right? It's like, if we're going to go on this outcomes based journey, I need to know that you know exactly what it is that I want you to deliver. So do you have a general approach to that? Is there a way that you break that down for the people you work with, whether it's employees or outsourced people?
Yeah. Look, again, people communicate in a variety of different styles. The key is communication.
Mm.
And it's very important as a business leader to always be aligned with your team on what that North Star is. How you do it will, of course, vary based on the people involved. I'm a very visual person. So, we've got this whiteboard. I've always had a whiteboard somewhere in close proximity of my desk. So I'm always like drawing stuff vigorously. But also, one of the things I realized is that it's also good to, when you have an idea, if you're thinking, or as your vision evolves, it needs to be documented somewhere for everyone so that they can sort of keep in touch with that. So, one of the first things we did, we built a brand architecture and identity doc. So what do we stand for at Backbone? Why do we exist? What is our mission? What is our goals? And quite often businesses do this in the early days and forget about it,
Mm.
but we actually go back to that document as a team very, very regularly. Every time there's an iteration or we pivot, we go and add to that. And that's also the first thing I get anyone who's joining the team. And even when we outsource projects to external businesses, and that's kind of been our growth model, where instead of hiring all full-time employees, we very often outsource to other businesses. And those businesses, we communicate what we stand for, and we get them to read that and say, have a read through. And then that will be the basis of our first conversation, because then we can plug in the gaps and answer questions, but it gives them a sense of who we are and what we stand for. And really the key is to work with people whose values align with you. So when you go through that process, you'll straight away know the ones who are not interested and the ones who really buy into the vision.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. There's definitely no doubt that communication in every facet is the most important part. I'm curious again. I'm sort of just leveraging off the things that I've seen in my wife's business and in my my work and all those bits and pieces. But the I love building that document and that sort of that piece of truth that allows everyone to understand like what it is that we're doing, right? What's the reason that we're here for? So when the sort of ambiguous situations arise, it's not a case of, oh, Kavita, what do I do here? Like, this isn't in the playbook. Like, do I need to do this or do I need to do that? And do you have that document and that artifact as a piece to help guide that decision and go, you kind of, 90% of what we're doing, right? You get the ethos, you get the understanding of what it is we're trying to achieve, and I'll let you use your judgment in order to make the right decision. And then obviously we'll review it. And is that the general approach there?
Absolutely. I think it's very important to be open to change, and change is the only constant in life. So it's all about constantly adapting, and finding that balance that works for everyone. Because what someone starts out with is very rarely what they end up with. So it's about molding, changing, so that you reach that harmony.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to go and focus more on you and your journey, you mentioned tech. Tell me how that happened, because you started your career more in the HR side of things. Is that the way I read your LinkedIn and some of those earlier jobs that you did, and then you moved through like LinkedIn and Dropbox and Uber? Like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
very unique, and it's a
Mine's a
high,
very funny
yeah.
story. So I'm actually an engineer.
Mhm.
So I'm an engineer that who you know I did my engineering. I mean, with Indian parents, it was inevitable, right? I was only ever given two career choices:
Yep.
a doctor or an engineer. And I'll tell you a secret. I do not do well with any side of blood. And so it came as no surprise to my parents when I chose to become an engineer. And look, I must admit, I have 4 years of engineering. I did it. I did well, but I just didn't see myself doing that for the rest of my life. And so
Mm.
that's when I decided I'm going to pursue my MBA, and I chose to specialize in marketing at the time. And I have to admit, when I did my MBA, I felt like I found myself. I learned more in 2 years
Mhm.
than I learned in the 4 years that I did my engineering, right? And that's me. But I really, really found myself. And so I specialized in marketing, and I had, this full career in marketing laid out in front of me. And yeah, one of my first job interviews straight out of uni, I was at a recruitment firm called Michael Page, right? Global MNC, top tier recruitment agency. And halfway through the interview, the lady asked me, "Do you want to come work for us?" And I was like, oh, straight out of uni, beautiful floor to ceiling windows, nice offices. Sure, why not? Right. And so I jumped into it. And agency side recruitment, I learned later on, was, hardcore, but one of the
Mm.
best training grounds I could ever have got. I learned so much in my time then that I moved into more account management, again, in that recruitment space. And then one of my customers, and this is the power of the Aussie coffee, right? We have a huge coffee culture here in Australia. But one of my clients rather, he moved to this new tech company. No one had heard about it, LinkedIn. And I met up for a coffee with him, as he'd started his first week, and we're just chatting. And he starts telling me about LinkedIn and how it's going to change the industry. And then he was like, "Do you want to come work for us?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he was like, "No, you can't say sure. You've got to be excited, Cav." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm excited." But then I went back home and I did my research, and I understood more about what LinkedIn was doing to the industry. And having come from that space, I, I, I realized this is going to be a game changer. And so anyway, long story short, I went ahead with, the interviews. 7 interviews later, I ended up in tech. And mind you, those days we didn't have the fancy LinkedIn offices they have today. My first office at LinkedIn was like a broom closet that I shared with another colleague of mine. And we were just like, okay, rubbing elbows as trying to type on laptops. But look, amazing experience. And it warms my heart to see what LinkedIn's become today.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so that introduction into the tech space, that
Yeah.
obviously gripped you enough to want to stick around.
Yeah.
And so what was it that you enjoyed about the sort of, whether it was the industry or the style of business, what was it that made you want to pursue other opportunities in that area?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I think back, I reckon every single role I've ever taken, I've been driven by this need to affect change,
Mhm.
right? And what I feel really was the biggest hook and got me, absolutely in love with SaaS and tech right from the LinkedIn days was the fact that we were disrupting the market and changing it for the better. And It's daunting when you're the unknown player, you're the underdog, when you're going into a room of cynics who are like, why should we pay for your product? What does this mean? What is people would ask us how LinkedIn is spelled back in the day, right? Reception would go Linked. Sorry, what was it? But then to be able to walk into a room of cynics and almost turn them into believers, as corny as that sounds, that was the most satisfying part of it. And then, I was very lucky that I got the opportunity to do that again when Dropbox launched in Australia, and then when Uber and Uber Eats launched. So yeah, that's been the best part of being in that tech space, is
Yeah.
being able to be part of something and growing it to a force for good.
Yeah. I can imagine to have that sort of an attitude, and I can imagine that came in spades, particularly like Uber in the early days, because there's a lot of, will it work? Won't it work? Can it disrupt it? Can it not? Especially like Uber Eats. Is Uber Eats going to work? Are people going to order food and get it
I
delivered to
know
their house?
Menulog
Like,
and Deliveroo were the incumbents, and they were big.
yeah. So I can imagine even as an employee, there might be a level of skepticism to the idea. Were you somebody that was a full believer of these ideas when you went in, or was there a little bit of convincing yourself that it needed to, be proven at scale to work?
Oh, 100%. I believed in all those businesses before I joined them. So, of course, when you first meet or are introduced to a new business, you must do your research. But it's only because I genuinely, heart of heart, believed that these businesses were going places and were doing something. That's what helped me probably be successful in those roles as well,
Yep.
right? I think if you've got to convince yourself about any business or any person, it's probably a sign that it's not a good fit.
Yep.
So and that comes through in your interactions with your future customers. So yeah, I'd say you've got to believe in it.
And naturally, I assume you came at it from that sort of marketing, account management side, how we're going to grow this. Is there a general, I can imagine you went through a number of layers of analysis when you were looking at those opportunities. You're like, what's the high level? Like, what's the big opportunities here? And then all the way down into the weeds of your research. But is there a general way that you would look at some of those opportunities that, if somebody else was looking at something and going like, oh, if I'm going to do a bit of an analysis and do some due diligence on a company that I think I might want to work for, is there a general way that you approach those consistently that somebody might be able to follow?
Yeah. So I always follow a few different things. So number one, I look at what the company vision is, like what is the big picture. Again, comes back to what I was describing earlier as the North Star, right? You've got to align to the North Star, but the company needs to have one,
Mm.
right? And so when you're speaking with any new business, always try to understand what's the big picture, where they're getting to, and then of course tactically and operationally, what does infrastructure look like today? I was always less worried about the today because I felt if you've got the vision, and then number two, if you've got the right people, right? So it was very important to me who I worked with as well, because when you're working with smart, intelligent, driven people, it's contagious, right? Everyone you all succeed together, right? And so for me, it was when I look back to all my roles that I've ever taken, it's the leaders. It's the leaders who I've met with. I always ask myself the question: can I learn something from this person?
Yep.
Right? And do I want to learn something from
Mm.
this person? And usually, when the answer is yes to both those questions, that's when you know that there's a fit. So look at the big picture. Where is this company going to? Right? Does it have legs? And then number two, the people who are there, the leaders who are going to be in that business, how much do they believe in that vision, and do you think you can learn from them? When you add all this together, it's part science, part art. So yes, you can have a little checklist, but you also got to trust your gut.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that sort
A
of
bit of intuition.
has been the guiding force for me.
Yeah. And just drilling into the North Star, just brought it up a couple of times now. What's how specific or how vague, or like what's a good North Star? And that might be a really hard question to answer right now, but like again, like if you're analyzing, is it like let's help 100 million people? Is it more altruistic? Yeah, I'm curious as to how you kind of go, I like that North Star, but I don't like that one.
Yeah, I think there's a few ways of describing a good North Star. I think it needs to be well communicated, right? The key is it needs to be something that is, well, realistic is a relative word, right?
Hmm.
Because it can be interpreted differently. But if you've got a timeline in place, um, does this North Star have a timeline? Does this have actual substance behind it? So it's a mix of all of those. Is it measurable?
Yeah.
Right? How will it be measured, quantitatively or qualitatively? Those are the kind of things. So you want to make sure that there's actual timelines attached to it. It's actually measurable. It's something that you can sort of buy into.
Mm.
That's why I said
And
it's part science, part art.
yeah.
So I think there's a way of writing visions, or North Stars, and missions. It's called SMART.
Yep.
I forget all the. I think one is measurable, attainable, results, and then timeline. I
Yeah.
forget what S is.
Specific. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
specific.
Specific, correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can follow that structure. So that's probably the science,
Yep.
but the arts again, it's gut instinct, right? So it's
Yeah.
always part science, part art that makes you know that this is the right North Star for you. Because there are plenty of other businesses that do really well, but it has to align with you as a person and your values.
Yeah. Do you remember off the top of your head what the visions were and the North Stars were for the Dropbox and the Uber when you got there, and sort of how they resonated with you at the time?
Oh gosh, I love that you're testing me now. Yeah, with LinkedIn, it was always connecting talent with opportunity.
Hmm.
That was it didn't have the timelines and stuff, but it was clear.
Yeah.
Connecting talent with opportunity. And then as we grew, it progressed to creating economic opportunity for everyone around the
Yep.
world,
Yeah.
right?
Nice.
And so both those, yeah, North Stars I remember for or vision statements for LinkedIn, they were clear, they were simple, they made sense, and especially coming from the industry that I was in previously, it just made sense. Connecting talent with opportunity. I mean, how much better can it get,
Yeah.
right? And with Dropbox, it was connecting people with information anywhere, anytime, um, anywhere, anytime,
Yeah.
right? Because those are the days when people still used USBs, and we were like, you don't need to.
No.
You can be anywhere in the world, and you should have access to your most important info
Yeah.
um, any time of the day or night, any any kind of, I
Device.
guess, connectivity,
Yeah.
but also any geography. So
Yeah.
yeah, there you
I
go.
remember using Dropbox when I was doing my undergrad back in like 2007, something like that, 2008, and that feels like a long, a long time ago. But it was, quite fresh and very cool and unique. I think at the time there weren't many people using it.
That's it. And so we just took that to the business world, to the
There you go.
corporate sector, and said, look, if you've got to access your information, and those were the days where people were still bound to, your desk, and work from home was a very scary
Mm.
concept. Um, so we were probably the pioneers in the whole work from anywhere, work from the park, if that's what it takes for you to get those creative juices flowing. But again, focus on the outcome, get the job
Yep.
done.
Yeah, I love it. Now, to go back to your studies,
Hmm.
you mentioned the growth that you went through in your MBA. I'm curious as to sort of where that growth was. What, like, was it, in the professional element? Was it more from an individual understanding yourself? Was it just in the learning and the knowledge that you were gaining? Yeah, sort of how did you grow, and sort of what did you, yeah, get most out of that?
Interesting. So if I think back to my MBA, I think where connected most was the fact that for the first time I felt I was applying the knowledge I was getting. Right. So you've got to remember the stark contrast for me. So I'd done 4 years of engineering, and engineering is, long. It's like 40 plus hours of classroom sessions,
Wow.
not to count the stuff after, and a lot of textbook, a lot of theory. Of course, there was the application side of it, in engineering, drawing, um, and there was that element, but there was a lot more. I felt it was a lot more textbook, a lot more theoretical, a lot more learning by rote. right? And then when I did my MBA, and this is again, it's all a personal thing, but for me, when I did my MBA, I remember the first time we had an open book exam. And I'm telling you, open book exams are far more challenging
Hmm.
than a closed book exam, right? Because it's relying on you having understood concepts, but then applying it in the right context against time. And I think that was the first time I did one of those. I was like, whoa, but also, whoa, that was
Yeah,
amazing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's what I enjoyed. And engineering, I mean, MBA, if I remember back, I think we had in all, with all our classroom sessions, maybe 10 to 12 hours a week.
Mm.
But I felt there was with the assignments and the all the other stuff that happens on top of it, I probably spent way more hours
Yeah.
learning, just
Mm.
not in a classroom. I was applying it. I had to read the textbooks, but then do something with the projects and the assignments. And, I thought that was just invaluable.
Yeah.
And I still smirk every time I get a memory of something I learned in during my MBA, and as I'm applying it in my day to day, and I go, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember the professor talking about that.
Yeah.
So
And so why the MBA specifically? Like you obviously done your engineering, you come to Australia, I take it not
mm,
long before, but sort of what was it that you were hoping to get out of the MBA, and sort of what made it what put it on your radar?
yeah, so like I said, I mean, some people know what they want to do,
Hmm.
right? And I reckon they're the lucky few. The vast majority of us are still figuring it out, right? Even when you're 18 or in your early 20s, you're still figuring out what you want to do. So like I said, I went through my engineering, did it, but in all honesty, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life when I finished my engineering. And I just knew I didn't see myself on a factory floor, right? Because I did chemical engineering as well. So I was like, look, loved it, but I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. So um, my my case is probably an anomaly, but I kind of fell into my MBA in that I did some research, took some time, read some books, and picked up a couple of marketing um, books, and
Hmm.
I just really liked the idea, and I was like, look, I feel like this would be the right fit for me. So probably not what you want to tell your viewers, but sometimes you stumble into the right path, and for
Yeah.
me it was exactly that. I read a few books. I was like, look, I feel this is the right path for me,
Mm.
and so I decided to do my MBA, and then I found that it could not have been better.
Yeah.
Um, it was perfect. I learned so much. So all I'd say is advice to those who are considering it is talk to people who've done it before you, learn from their experiences, but at the end, you've got to take a chance yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I would tell them listen to this podcast, but hey,
And
um, yeah, and if you think back and I guess the things you've achieved so far and your career, you know, I'm assuming you still would have done very well without an MBA and those sorts of things. But how do you think it's contributed to your work and your career?
hugely, hugely. So without getting into specifics, I think what MBA does is number one, it teaches you to apply the skills and the knowledge presented, and I've already touched upon that.
Yeah.
Um, but also, MBA, doing an MBA is very broad. The first year, you do this range of subjects, right? Complete range of subjects. So we covered finance and accounting and procurement, supply chain, business strategy, international marketing. There was just so many subjects that I did my first year. And then in your second year, you tend to specialize, right, in one or two subjects. And that's when I really doubled down into marketing. And I studied subjects like buyer behavior and sales effectiveness and market research and all of that. So when I think about what it gave me in those 2 years, it gave me like this whole holistic perspective of the business industry.
Mm.
And so once I came out of my MBA, it was less relevant whether I pursued a role in an engineering firm, a marketing agency, or a recruitment firm, as it turned out, right? I'd already learned to start applying any kind of skill or knowledge that was put in front of me. It was application to in context of the role you're in, right? And so as you pointed out, I've changed so many roles. I started out in agency side recruitment, went into account management, then went into the SaaS space, led teams, um, launched businesses. So with Templify, I was employee number one in the region. So launched that office. And then, of course, launched my own two businesses. So I feel what I learned in my MBA applied every single day.
Yeah, I love that. Um, there was something that I was thinking earlier on, but it's gone because I don't like holding on to things. So I'm going to move on. Um, it's gone. I love all of that. It's so true. That's what I was going to say. So I remember somebody using the analogy of getting an MBA is a bit like learning the rules of like the chessboard, right? And you can think of all the pieces on a chessboard as the different departments within a business. And you're obviously not the specialist piece itself, but you're
Yes.
obviously the player, and you can understand what each of the pieces do to understand its role within the business. And the better understanding you have of how they all work together, the more effectively you can use it, right?
Love that analogy.
Mm.
So true. Because even now, when I run my own business, of course, I've got I've got a virtual CFO. I've got someone doing the bookkeeping. I've got someone doing the tech. And again, I don't physically code or do the BAS or do the financial strategy, but I have enough knowledge to be able to oversee it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right, it's the rules of the chessboard. So I
Mm.
understand the rules of the chessboard, and I'm playing one of the pieces. But yeah, I think that's a great analogy. I'm going to steal that. Going to use
Excellent.
that.
Yeah, I didn't come up with it. That was a colleague of mine back in the day. Um, Now you touching on there, like all the different moving pieces you have of backbone and that, but you also, are involved in a number of other things that clearly indicates to me you're a very busy person. How do you go about identifying priorities? Obviously, making sure that you're not burning yourself out, that you're finding, the right amount of space to recover properly. Like, do you approach that in a particular way?
Honestly, Ross, sometimes I feel all I'm missing is that little red clown nose because I'm always like juggling things all over. No, in all seriousness, yes, it is always it's tricky
Mm.
to make sure that you're balancing health, family, work, you know, everything else. Um, but I always think about this one. So, CEO at LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner,
Mhm.
he used to always talk about this whole work-life harmony, right? And I'm sure I'm not alone. I think majority of the LinkedIn staff all followed it after he mentioned it. But it was so true. He used to say, you need to be happy when you get to work, when you open your laptop, and you need to be happy when you shut your laptop and you go home, right? And it sounds intuitive, but think about it. You need to be happy when you start work, and you need to be happy when you leave work.
Yep.
That's when you've hit that perfect work-life harmony. And very early on in my career, when I'd heard that, I was like, that's something I'm gonna aim to do. I need to be happy at both places, because if you're happy only at one or the other, that's when there's a problem, right? That's when there's burnout and all the others. So it's about making sure that you balance it all. Um, do I have any secret formula or structure for my day? No. Every single day of mine is different. But I make sure that I make time for my health,
Mhm.
my family, and yeah, and work. So
Yeah.
it's a balance.
Yeah.
It's a balance. Yeah.
Are you a naturally driven person that you find it harder to pull yourself away from your work than to sort of put the laptop down and close it? Is that your sort of general predisposition?
Yeah, I wouldn't deny I'm definitely naturally driven, but I also feel I'm very disciplined, and that probably comes from the engineering side of
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Very disciplined, so it's about discipline.
Yeah.
So yes, there are times when I don't want to do it. I have to shut my laptop because there's another priority. But I just make sure that somewhere during the day, I make sure I make time for it and open the laptop again and fix it up. So, yeah, I work. People ask me, how you structure your day between your two businesses, and I said, well, it started off with 2 and 3 days for both.
Hmm.
Now it's like 7 days of everything, but that's not really a bad thing. I make sure I balance it out, and
Yeah.
I have time to do other things as well.
Yeah. I guess being your own boss, you've got the freedom to go, I'll do this morning for me and I'll catch up a little bit later. as opposed to
Correct.
the
It
old
does
nine to
mean
five.
sometimes you're working till 1 a.m. in the morning,
Yeah.
but you control your own deadlines, because if you don't, then your business is in trouble. So
Right.
it kind of works out. One thing I will say is my learning more recently is make sure you look after your health.
Mm,
If you lose your health, it doesn't matter how successful your
correct.
business is,
Yep.
and your family is not going to be able to do without you. So make sure you look after your health. So prioritize health in whatever way
Yep.
that works for you. That's something that I've definitely found makes a difference.
Yeah. And not to get too personal, but was that just through learning and picking up information, or was that through an experience of something that happened itself?
Yeah, look, I probably did teeter around the burnout at one point, and that's when I realized that health is more important than
Yep.
anything else. But ironically, the more I focused on my health, the better I got at managing
Yeah.
everything else in my life.
Yep.
So it's amazing what half an hour at the gym, or going for a quick walk around the block can clear your mind, clear your perspective, and actually energize you, make you more productive straight after. So yeah, I'm a big believer of walking meetings. So if I ever
Yep.
have a meeting with any of my team, I usually prefer to go for a walk and just go for a walk around the block or the park nearby, and just discuss everything we would have in a
Yeah.
room just on a walk. And so, simple things like that can actually make a huge difference. But yeah,
Yep.
it was probably me avoiding reaching that, burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big person that I love learning. So if I get a topic that I'm interested in, I'll sort of double down on it and I'll sort of do everything. And I went through a couple of years ago a huge rabbit hole of health and everything from the sleeping, mindfulness, nutrition, exercise, and understanding. And yeah, that journey, I feel like there's no real better way to try and change behavior than with a bit of information. Like you
Mm,
can't, unless you're putting a new input in, you can't really expect a new output because you're just going to run on the same routine, right? So it's learning, what is the impact of actually getting 8 hours of sleep? And
yeah,
if you're not doing that consistently, to your point, your cognitive abilities are not where they need to be. Likewise, if you don't eat and exercise properly, and it's going through that, I sort of go, I look at some business people and I'm like, man, I reckon if you changed a few different things, and like uber successful business people, I reckon if you changed a few bits of your lifestyle, you'd be even more successful. You'd probably work a bit less because you're prioritizing other things, but like your brain, which is already extremely impressive, would be even better. And those sorts of stuff. And yeah, it's a hard one because everyone's on their journey and doing their thing, and I'm not a preacher, but I do very much value my health as well, and it's something that doesn't generally get missed.
yeah, no, very true. Could not
Yeah,
agree more.
yeah. Now you also do a bit of a podcast for Backbone. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do.
Excellent. Yeah, and sort of
So,
some of, and just I guess I give you a chance to just tell people about it, where they can find it, and how they can have a listen, and what they might be able to learn and get out of it.
yeah, so our mini podcasts, we call them, because they're not very long.
Mm,
Um, they started out just as in response to an ask from our members. So some of our early members, again, they were looking at ways to promote their businesses. And while we were creating that opportunity, when we first started, we were still a small number of businesses on the platform. And so I just came up with this idea of very amateur podcasts, but really just spending 20 minutes speaking with someone in the C suite, or someone who had founded their business from the ground up, and just asking them, you know, their learnings, just picking their brains for those, golden nuggets that can really benefit other members. So it was more of a learning opportunity as well. And we started posting it on LinkedIn. But what we do is we'd get the whole podcast, but we'd only post a snippet on LinkedIn. And we just found they were just hugely successful.
mm,
Uh, and so that kind of just led to this whole making it a formal thing. So we've been doing this now, I guess, coming up to about 15, maybe just over, maybe 16 or 17 months now.
wow.
It was, when did we start? October 2022. Yeah, so about that much time. And now we just post on YouTube. So,
Yep.
we're not very big. We haven't actually gone into the Spotify and Apple space.
Yep.
We just post the full podcast on YouTube for those who want to see it. The snippets we put on TikTok, on LinkedIn, Instagram. It's a 90-second snippet, the best bit of what our founders or business owners have talked about. And
Yep.
yeah, we just find that people get a lot from it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
as long as we're creating learning moments for our members and also other business leaders out there, that's really our aim with our very amateur podcast.
That's cool. So what would somebody search in YouTube to find that one?
It's all on our on our channel. So it's Biz
Channel.
Backbone. 9518, I think, is the handle. Biz Backbone 9518. So yeah, that's the handle. Go there, and in under the podcast section, we've got both the seasons. We've got season 1 and then season 2.
Excellent. I'll put that in the show notes as well. But I feel like I've taken up plenty of your time. Is there anything else you'd like to share, whether it's work related, MBA related, or just advice for people that are interested in the things that you do and your expertise?
No, I just want to say, really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. Love what you're doing. I said this to you when we spoke a couple of weeks ago. I believe there's a growing recognition of the importance of an MBA. And I cannot stress how much it's helped me. So big believer. If anyone wants to have a chat, happy to have a chat about that. And then, yeah, small plug is, if you know a small business or are a small business yourself, check out the Backbone platform. We're here to help, you guys grow. So check us out.
Excellent. Well, thank you again.
bizbackbone.com.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes too, so anybody having a listen can go and click the link down there. But very much appreciated. I'll push the stop to the record button, but I'll keep you on here for another little bit. But absolute pleasure talking to you, Kavita.
Thanks, Ross.
Where's my mouse gone?